Okay. I'm going to get started. I see it's just after noon. And I am recording this, so let's see how that goes. But anyway, welcome to SBIR Basics. I'm Brian Walsh. Before I get started, so how many here know what SBIR funding is? Small Business Innovation Research Funding. Okay, 2 of you do. 3, it wasn't even 3 because we just did. And has anyone taken advantage of it before? No. Okay.
I've advised teams that have gotten it before, but I haven't taken it myself.
Okay. All right. Great. All right. Perfect. All right, so basically what I'm going to talk about today is what I call SBIR Basics. And I'll explain what that acronym means in a minute. Let's kind of get to it. So I'm with the UWM Research Foundation, and this is our team. And basically, we are a nonprofit organization that supports UW Milwaukee, and we're the ones that take innovations that come from campus and we try to commercialize them. And so we work with intellectual property. We try and do licensing. We try and that might be to an established business or it might be to a startup, but we're the nonprofit that works with those kinds of things that come off campus. And we have sort of 3 areas that we focus on. 1 is igniting startups, 2 is fostering corporate research partnerships, and 3 is leveraging IP expertise. And again, this is our team that I'm showing here. And so the question is, why me? Why am I giving this talk? And I'm new. Yeah, just this. You can tell this morning in the same shirt. But I'm new to UWM Research Foundation. I started here about 8 weeks ago. And before that, I was at an organization called the Wisconsin Center for Technology Commercialization, or CTC for short. And what that organization did primarily was counsel Wisconsin businesses, small businesses, and startups on how to find this kind of funding that's the subject of today. And also at that position, I was a program manager for programs that helped people who did get this kind of funding. So there's entrepreneurship development for people who got this funding. And also I have served on some of the review committees for these funds, as well as my colleague Jessica. So a few of us have experience reviewing proposals from the reviewers' experience, the reviewer side, and critiquing them. It is us, yeah, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about them at the end because it's a great resource for people. And so, yeah, it is a state-funded organization, and I'll list a few resources, and it's a really good direction to go. And so this is my teaser: is what do these people have in common on this slide? And these are, I won't tease you too much. I'll say that these are past and present UWM people who have ties to companies that have received the kind of funds that I'm going to talk about, these SBIR funds. So these small businesses where it was maybe either startups or maybe they were working with a company, but all of these UWM people have participated in this program in one way or the other. And also other part of my teaser, the program I'm going to talk about is basically every year it provides $4 billion in federal seed funding, so federal grant money and grant and contract money to help early stage ideas get to market. And again, funding small businesses. And so what I'm going to talk about today is I'm just going to give you an overview of the program. And then I'm going to talk about a few of the agencies that offer this. And then I'm going to talk, just present some resources that are available and introduce you to this talk today is a kickoff for, I'm going to be offering office hours to meet with people one-on-one to talk about their interest in this program, and maybe can take them sort of to the next step of, or at least answer some more detailed questions. So let's start with the overview of what this SBIR STTR program is all about. And starting with these acronyms, so SBIR stands for Small Business Innovation Research, and STTR stands for Small Business Technology Transfer. And I'll probably, as I go forward, I'll just say SBIR, and I mean both of them because it's a mouthful to say both of those things at all the time. But I will, at times, I will also make a distinction because I'm trying to differentiate you and tell you kind of why they're different and why one might be interesting and the other more than interesting than another. But in general, these are grants or contracts that go to a company. So they're not academic grants. They can be indirect, there's indirect involvement there, but they go to a company. And so the company pitches the proposals. The funds go for small business research. They're for development of things that have commercial potential. So it's not basic research, it's applied. It's something that could be a product in the future. But these, even though the money goes to a small business, the small business can subcontract or consult or work with research labs in a variety of ways. It could be as a consultant, a fee for service, could be as a sub-awardee on the grant, but there are many ways that people from universities can interact with the small businesses if they aren't part of the small business themselves. And I'll talk a little bit later about this, but the STT, there are these two versions, this SBIR and STTR. The STTR allows more involvement from a university, and so we see that those kinds of proposals do happen, are pretty, maybe a heavier, happen a little bit more with university contact. So overall, there are 11 different agencies, and again, I'm showing this SBIR and STTR here, but overall, the message on this slide is there are 11 different agencies that provide this funding. Agencies you know and love from the federal government, like the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy and Education, National Institutes of Health, so a wide range of agencies, and they are the agencies that have the most money, that have the most funding. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about these a bit later, some of these a little bit later. And all of the agencies provide this SBIR funding. 6 of them provide this other track, this STTR funding. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So budget-wise, I mentioned before that there's over $4 billion available every year. And this program is mandated by Congress for these agencies, and they have to put aside a fraction of their budget, their external research dollar budget for this program. And year after year, it's been in existence since 1982.
What's the difference between contacts and grants?
Yep, good question. So a grant is generally the money is put out there for the applicant to conduct a research project. It's usually a project that the researchers have identified by themselves. It's kind of the idea for the project came from them. They design the experiment kind of based on an innovation they have in mind, and the reviewers, the agencies that are funding it, look at it and say, well, this is appropriate for what we're trying to fund. And so it's less prescribed by the agency is one characteristic. The contract funding tends to be an agency is looking for a specific solution to a specific problem. And the Department of Defense typically does contracts. And so they'll say, you know what, we need a better way to, transport troops and with a better tire. So they'll be very specific. And ultimately, they're looking for an innovation that they're going to be able to purchase when the project is done, if the project's done successfully, whereas grants tend to be more general and maybe the product to be a little further down the road, and the person and the agency providing the funding doesn't intend to be a customer at all. Usually the contracting ones, they hope to be a customer. They hope to fund something that is going to come back to them and solve a problem immediately. So what I'm showing, kind of thanks for the question. So what I'm showing here is just how the pie is divided up, right? So if there's this doesn't add up to 4 billion because this is a couple years old, but if there's $4 billion, the Department of Defense has half of it, right? So because they have the biggest budget, in other ways. And then Health and Human Services is where the National Institutes of Health is. So they have the second biggest piece of the pie, and you can kind of see Department of Energy, National Science Foundation. And you can see there's a lot of little thin slices. I mentioned there are 11 agencies there. So there's a few that just, looks like tiny pieces of the pie, but this is generally how it's divided up. And the other point I'll show here is it says SBIR is 3.28 billion and STTR is 453 million. So there's a difference in amount of funding available between those two tracks, those two parts of the program. And again, I don't want to get too far in the weeds there, but just that's another difference between those two programs. And so really, what kinds of things qualify for this kind of funding? Again, I'll just call it SBIR, but what kind of things qualify? And really, the funding is broken down into different phases. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 2. Those are the things that are actually funded by grants or contracts. And in a phase 1, the agencies are looking for projects that are trying to determine if an idea is even feasible, right? So the idea behind this funding is, if you were to take an early stage technology idea, you just have it and you kind of scratched it out on a piece of paper, or maybe you've done something in a lab, some first steps in a lab. But if you were to take that to an investor, they'd say, no, we're not, you haven't proven anything. That's way too risky for us. We see thousands of pitches every year, and that's way too early. And you couldn't go to a bank to find it. Maybe you could find a rich aunt or uncle or somebody that might, but really the ideas are so risky at this point, especially when these technologies take a long time to get to market. And so the government recognizes that, and they say, okay, well, our SBIR program is to fill this gap. It's to try and help bridge this gap between an early stage idea and a place where it might be attracted to an investor, or where the company might be able to get it to market themselves, or they might be able to attract a strategic partner. And so a phase 1 project is the beginning. It's saying, okay, do some kind of lab scale or some kind of experiment that can happen over 6 to 12 months to prove initial feasibility. Maybe you have 2 or 3 technical objectives that say, if we can prove this, then it's worth going forward. If we, set out to prove this and we can't, and maybe this isn't an idea, maybe we have to reset our thinking, or maybe this isn't going to work. Yeah.
Looking at the chart, phase 1, let's see phase 2. Customer base, stuff like that. So if you actually reach that point, it seems as though
Yep, exactly. So even though they say, that's a good observation. So even though they say phase 3 and we have phase 3 on there, phase 3 means you're on your own. Phase 3 is typically, it's just their way of kind of, okay, well, phase 1 and 2, we got you covered. Phase 3, you're on your own. And there's subtleties, things aren't that cut and dry, but generally phase 3 means you've gone out and you're getting your own sales, or you've attracted investors, and you're past the point where you need these grants or contracts from these awarding agencies. So yeah, good observation. And so really phase 1, feasibility, typically the range, and it depends on again, there are 11 different agencies. And if you think about the ones as I kind of listed them before, they all have their own personality and their own way of doing things. Even they're all under this umbrella of SBIR. The Army does something different than the National Institutes of Health and than the Department of Education. They all kind of have their own way of implementing this and their own rules within it. And so generally a phase one project is 6 to 12 months long, and it's $100,000 to maybe $300,000 or $400,000 is the funding amount, depending on the agency. But it's generally about proving feasibility early stage. And then phase two, if you are successful in your phase one project, generally you can apply to phase two. And phase two is saying, okay, well, we've proven feasibility. We want to take this to the next step. Maybe we want to do a prototype. Maybe we want to pilot test this, something, whatever is kind of a logical next step based on what you did in the previous, in the phase one study. And that typically ratchets up to the $1 million range. So it's in some agencies, it's up to 2 million. So it's the range is generally 600,000 to maybe 2 million for a phase two project. And typically those last about 2 years. And when you do a proposal, it requires all the same stuff. You need to talk about all the same stuff you did about in a phase one. Plus you have to talk about, hey, here's what happened in phase one. Now I'm applying for phase two. You have to give a report. And the big difference is that you have to do what's called the commercialization plan. So in phase one, in all of these, you need to have an awareness that you have a technology that has some commercial potential, right? So there's lots of, there's basic research that goes on, and that doesn't have to have commercial potential. But for SBIR, because it's business, it's for business, it's innovations meant to go to market, you need to always be aware that there's a business case for what you're doing, and that the pressure, the need to make a stronger case happens in phase two, because you're taking things a little further, and they're going to in the proposal, they ask you for a whole section on the commercial potential, as well as talking about the technical side of things. And then, and then you get more money, you get a higher level of money. And so, like I said, each of these have their own nuances, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of them more specifically as we go along. I mentioned that the kinds of things that they're looking for are early stage ideas. They're looking for technologies. They are, I didn't say this before, but the phrases I've heard people use in talks are, they're looking for revolution, not evolution. They're looking for research projects, not engineering projects. But all of these still have the potential for making a product or a service. And so there are sort of these high level criteria are, does it qualify as a research project? Is it innovative? And does it have some, what they call technical risk to it? If you were to tell me, I have this great idea, I know it's going to work, I just need to put the pieces together. That's not what this program's for. It's kind of, I think having a great idea, I think it could work. I just need to prove some initial steps before it does, right? So that's kind of one of the overarching criteria. Another one is that it has to have the possibility for significant impact, right? So it's, well, I have this idea, but it's only going to help, 10 people I know. That's not what they're looking for. But I have this idea, and it has a great deal of commercial potential, and it can solve a major health problem or a problem that needs to be solved out there. Then that's the sweet spot. And so here is high risk, high reward, which typically fund at high risk, high reward innovations, things with commercial potential. I said that before. What makes them competitive is that you are showing that you have maybe some strategic partners, that you're already thinking about how you're going to get that to market. You're taking you're getting feedback and advice or determining needs from industry out there. So you're coming at it from not just like an idea person, I have this idea, this technology idea, because this is the field I worked in all my life, but I have this idea, and I've talked to industry, and I have an understanding that somebody wants this idea, and that it has commercial. Yeah.
Can you consider
so in a phase one, you can make your case for that, right? So I've been in this industry, And I have, I've been interacting with this industry, and you can make a case for why you think this is a good idea, why you think it has the potential. But think of them, and in a phase 2, you are definitely going to want to take that further. And in both cases, think about this as competitive, right? So you might, maybe your industry well, but maybe there's someone else on the same level that knows their industry well, but they've gone out and they've gotten letters of support from people who said, well, should this get funded, we would be interested in trying this product, or we would be interested in pilot testing, or we would be interested in funding something. So there's sort of the, what you could do, and then what you can do to be more competitive, right? So, but a lot of times it starts with, you have an idea, you're in a field of, you have a field of expertise, and because of that, you have connections and an understanding of what's going on in a particular industry. So the kinds of things that aren't funded are, I said it before, basic research. So I mentioned the phrase about revolutionary, not evolutionary, not things that are, market studies, that kind of thing. Taking that a little further, usually it's things they're looking for technologies and scalable businesses. They're not really, again, a local restaurant or dry cleaner. That's not the purpose of this program. They are not, if your project or idea is too far along, they're not interested in that. And that goes along with what I said before. This is for early stage ideas. If you say, hey, I've got a lab scale prototype, or I've got a prototype and I just need money to get it to market, then you're pitching to investors or someone else. But it's not meant for purchasing equipment or facilities. And I mentioned this before, it needs to have some significance. I'll just say a little bit about these. I mentioned there's kind of these 2 tracks, SBIR and STTR. And on the left, I'm showing a bar graph for what SBIR is. And basically, there's a level of involvement that the small business is required and allowed to have in the 2 different tracks. And so in an SBIR, the small business can do all the work. They can use all those grant funds. I'm just going to call them grant funds. The small business is going to use all those grant funds, and they can do it all themselves, but they can subcontract out up to 1/3 of the work. So maybe they have, the facilities and the resources to do most of it, but they want to subcontract to a university partner to do some lab research, or to take advantage of some expertise that's happening at the university. The STTR requires that the company work with a nonprofit research partner. So at least 30% of that project has to go to a research partner, and up to another 30% can go to them or some other subcontracting business. So, yep.
So is the one with the 2, is that is that SBIR or is that STTR?
Yep, the one on the left, the one with just 2 shades, is the SBIR. So
Okay.
the 66% is what the small business has to do, and the remaining 1/3 is what they're allowed to let someone else, hire someone else to do, or subcontract someone else to do. So they can do it all, or they can. Yep.
You mentioned this can be used to purchase equipment. So in the case of, like, say you're not at early stage research, or say you're a little bit farther into phase 1 than most, but in order to accelerate your research onto phase 2 to get to that, sort of next threshold, you have almost everything that you need, but like you lack a piece of machinery that would enable, facilitate your research in some way. So that would be something you would be able to subcontract out.
Yep. Yeah. So that's a good question, right? So, and that cutoff is usually like a piece of equipment that's $5,000 or more, right? So there's, in lab equipment is really expensive, can be really expensive. So there's some things are, under a certain amount are allowed. If you're getting into something that's, higher, bigger ticket item, then what a lot of applicants do, or a lot of people doing the projects do, is they'll either lease it, they'll say, oh, can I rent your, NMR, or your centrifuge, or whatever it is, can I rent? Or that part will go to the sub-awardee or subcontractor because they have the resources to take care of that. So
and try not to snowball too much, but so say you're leasing or renting out, something facilities related, if that, cost of leasing or renting whatever piece of equipment, machinery, lab space, you name it, is less than 5,000, is that something that you would be able to, I guess, spend this money on?
Yeah.
It costs $10,000 to rent this MRI machine. Probably doesn't, but just pulling it out of my head, then that would not be applicable.
Right. So if it's, and it varies by agency, but let's just say that, if it's $5,000 or less, you can put it on in your budget for the grant. If it's more than that, you can't, or you might, if it's close, you might need to make some kind of justification. And again, the fallback is talk to your program manager when you get down to that level. But in general, that's the idea, is that they really don't intend this for you to pick up a piece of equipment that you can use for the rest of its 20-year life, and that they've just funded you for a new piece of equipment. They want to fund you for the work, so yep.
Doesn't that assume you predict? Is that true?
It does assume that, and I think, I guess I don't know how true it is. Yeah. I mean, I think people usually find a way, and usually often it's through a academic institution, a research institution that maybe they are renting lab space, or they're renting it may not be obvious until you need it, right? So you're like, oh, okay, I need access to, such and such machine or such and such instrument. And I know the UWM has one of those, or I know, another university or someone else has one of those. And there are, especially, I'm not sure what field you're in, but, there are also, kind of like incubator labs or innovation centers that do that kind of thing. It just depends on the field. So,
I just imagine small investigator letting other people in his lab at night.
Yeah.
One can see some associate professor. But in any case.
Yeah, it does happen though. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
I don't have any money.
Right. Yeah. So it's a good question. So these are a couple of some eligibility points. I'm not going to go into huge detail on these, but so what is a small business according to the SBIR? It's any company that's less than 500 employees, which is a pretty big small business to me. And it has to be at least 50% owned and controlled by U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents. Has to be a for-profit company. And you have to demonstrate that it has the staff, the facilities to get the job done for the project. And if it doesn't, then it's they're sub-awarding or subcontracting to someone that can. So really, to be competitive, you need to demonstrate that you got everything you need to do this project. Yep.
This the SB one, or is it?
So this is both of them. Yeah, this is
both of
yep.
them.
Mhm, yep. And for as far as the individual, or what they call the principal investigator, the person who's taking the lead on this project, there are some differences between the SBIR and the STTR. In general, that person has to convince the reviewers that they have the ability to run this project. So there's not a degree requirement. Someone does not have to have a PhD. They don't have to have a college degree, or they just have to demonstrate to the reviewers that they're able to execute a project about whatever the subject matter is, about this particular biology project, or this particular physics project, or software. And so again, it becomes a matter of competition for you're competing against other applicants. And so you want to demonstrate that you've got someone who can take this on and have some success in taking it to completion. There are rules, different rules about how much the employment status of the applicants, right? So generally they want the person to be primarily employed by the company. And that means that the flip side of that means is they can't be working full-time at somewhere else. And this depends on agency, from agency to agency, what that means. And however, for the STTR, I'll be right with you in a second here. For the STTR, there's a little more latitude. So the principal investigator for most agencies can be from the nonprofit research institution or that's collaborating with them, and it doesn't have to have left their position to become a small business. So that's one reason that STTRs are popular with universities, with academic institutions. But there are definitely nuances to this. Just be aware that there are a few different options here. So, yeah.
So you can work 2 jobs with one of them, or you can work 2 jobs? You
can, but you can't work full-time at one of them. So, for example, the National Science Foundation has there are other definitions by other agencies. This is the one I remember off the top of my head. The National Science Foundation says that you cannot work 19.6 hours at another place. You have to be primarily employed at the business, and you can't work, any more than 19.6 hours somewhere else. And again, these can get real specific by agency. So my last slide here, in talking about the overview part of this, is these are some steps that happen, like typical steps that happen before you actually apply. And these are kind of things when I'm going to talk about at the very end of that, I'm offering office hours. So some of these are the kinds of things that maybe I can help with on a one-on-one basis. But generally, you want to determine what I call the SBIR worthiness of your idea. Is it early stage? Is it innovative? Does it have the potential for significant impact? Sort of these higher level, does it match with the program overall? And then it's sort of narrowing things down to, okay, well, I think I have an idea that satisfies all that SBIR worthiness. What agencies might be a good match for me, right? So often one idea doesn't just match with one agency. There might be 2 or 3 different agencies that could have an interest in your kind of project idea. And then kind of once you narrow it down to maybe 2 or 3 out of 11, then it's what I call shopping for topic matches. And each of those agencies has their own, what they call solicitation. They have a call for proposals out there where they define what they're looking for. And so you have to go out and look for those calls for proposals, and you kind of shop around and say, okay, NIH is looking for this, this, and this, and I might have an idea that matches that. And so kind of narrowing things down. And once you do that, then the next thing you do is you vet your idea with what's called a program manager from those agencies before you go through this long process of writing a proposal and waste your time, only to find out that they didn't really want you anyway, or want to waste their time either. So these are kind of the front end things, and the things that I've talked about some of these, but the things to consider as you're doing this, as you're kind of going through these steps, is always keep in mind, what is the business case for your idea? Do you think it has some kind of commercial potential? How are you going to frame the research project? So if you think about a phase 1 and you're trying to prove feasibility, this is tricky. I mean, if you come from a research background, it's less tricky because you're used to doing this. If you come from the entrepreneur side or the small business side and haven't done much research, it's trickier. But it's like, okay, how can I frame a feasibility research project that's going to happen in 6 to 12 months that will allow me to determine whether this is a go or no go decision from developing the technology side of it. So you don't have to have that all worked out on these early stages, but it's helpful to have an idea of where you're heading. Who will be the PI? So we talked about kind of why, the PI and the STTRs and SBIRs, but who's going to make the most sense to be the PI, the person that applies? Who will you need on your team to be competitive? So even if you, even if you're
Like
the
a
PI,
lawyer competitive or?
well, it could be a lawyer, but it's more once you frame your project, and if you're the person applying for it and you have expertise in the field, in one aspect of the work that needs to be done, and you need to, maybe you're a biologist who's developing a software platform, and you have the biology expertise, and you can, easily kind of make a case for that. But who on your team is going to convince the reviewers that you have the ability to develop a software platform?
So it could be like a organization to fight for you, or it would have to be a lawyer?
No, it doesn't have to. The lawyer probably isn't, the lawyer probably is, it would really depend, but a lawyer is probably not the one that's going to put you in this scenario, is going to kind of put you over the top in terms of competition. It's probably going to be someone who's done software development and knows about software platforms, or, so you're whatever your project is, you're trying to demonstrate to the reviewers, to the agency, that you've got the crack team, the best team that's going to be able to get this thing through that project. And then, maybe you get through that and you're ready to apply for phase 2, then you would rethink your team, right? So, okay, phase 2, I'm going to sell this thing, or I want to get it closer to selling, and I want to find pilot partners. Well, who can I bring onto my team that will help me access pilot partners, or help me understand, even though you're not ready to sell it, who will help me understand the market I'm trying to address? So you're always going to think about where are the risks in your proposal, and how can you make the people reading the proposal feel more comfortable about giving you money, right? So, and then always consider, if you're coming from, whatever university policies that you need to be thinking about, maybe conflict of interest policies or whatever, but that's just a blanket statement. So.
Through vendors, that's the big one.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
For campuses.
Yep. Okay. Yep.
What extent business engineering or something?
So in a phase 1, less so. They ask, depending on the agency, you don't have to say as much about the business case. It might be a few paragraphs versus in phase 2, where it might be 10, 16, 12, 12 pages about your commercial case. And so not as much in a phase 1. And I've been on some review committees, and even on a phase 2 as a commercial reviewer, and most of the discussion happens around the technical side of the proposal, depending on the agency. But so in a phase 1, it's really demonstrating that you have the technical chops to get the idea done. And it's helpful to have, at least to suggest that you've done a little analysis about what the market is, or what it could be, that you're not just, hey, I developed this cool technology and I think people are going to want it, but that you have demonstrated that you have evidence that there's a need. And so that's always helpful, no matter what. It gets more helpful with the phase 2. Okay, so I'm going to go through some agency highlights that I think will help, I guess, solidify some of the things I've said. You're going to get a little repetition here, so I might skip through some slides, but and I don't know if people want me to share these slides, but I certainly can if you want. And so I'm not going to talk about all the agencies. I'm going to talk about the ones that tend to have the most money, but the ones that in my experience of my previous job, where we saw most activity. Yep.
Do you do it like lower to highest or highest to lowest?
Depends on what order his slides are in.
Yeah. I have a specific reason for putting them in this order, but yeah, I will tell you when I'm going to tell you what their budgets are along the way. So here I'm going to start with the National Science Foundation, and you can see in red that their annual budget is $200 million, and they are usually they're usually fourth in the amount of money that they have. And I started with the National Science Foundation because they're the ones that sort of started this whole thing. Yep.
He's gonna explain to us if it's gonna be SB.
SBIR, STTR.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll mention so all of the ones I'm talking about now have both programs.
Okay.
So that's another reason I picked these. They have both programs, and I won't within each of these, because there's just not enough time. I'm not going to talk about how each one treats each of those, because it's just not that different. At that point, you should be talking to your program manager. So.
There could be a whole day long.
Yeah, exactly. Like the SBIR, STTR, definitely. A lot of times I don't talk about it at all, but with this audience, it's really relevant to people at a university setting. So it's kind of the same things. They're looking for impact, technology and technological innovation, market pull, and scale. So these are all things I've talked about before. Of all the agencies, the National Science Foundation cares the most about technological innovation. You think about it, it's the National Science Foundation, right? That's what they're there for. And so they have the highest bar for, okay, this is something novel. This is something really new that we're contributing. And so they have the highest bar for that. What they also say is they fund almost all areas of technology. So when you go to their site, you'll see a grid that looks like this. And I don't know how well you can, because you can see all these different topic areas. And if you click on any one of those, you'll drill down to more description about the kinds of things they're looking for. And actually, this is me. I clicked on a couple of those buttons. The top one on the left is advanced manufacturing. The bottom one on the left is environmental technologies, just to show you a few examples. And when you click on those buttons and see advanced manufacturing, for example, and I can't read it on my screen what those subtopics are, but you'll see the person who's the program director or manager. You'll see contact information for them. And a lot of times you can kind of just say, oh yeah, here's something that totally matches my area of interest. And that's awesome. That's great. The next step, I showed you that arrow where you're kind of getting toward those steps before applying, where there's a vet your idea. So with National Science Foundation, they're the only agency that does it this way. They've sort of pioneered this a couple of years ago. Is they have a project pitch format where it's very well defined. They have a form. They say, okay, we want you to give us up to 500 words about the technology innovation. We want you to give us 500 words about objectives and challenges. We want you to tell us a little bit about the market opportunity in your team, and click, submit it, and we'll look at it and we'll let you know what if we think it's something worthy of going forward. And I will say from experience, they tell you that this could take 3 to 4 weeks for them to get feedback to you. And I've seen them respond within 8 hours, and I've never seen them take more than a week for them to respond. So you can get you have a pretty well-defined form for vetting your idea, and you can get an answer pretty quickly back about what they think. I know from talks I've been to that they say, the kind of the however is, they say that they accept about 2/3 of their project pitches. So the net is pretty, it's not a very tight net. They let quite a few come through. And if they don't think something's appropriate, they'll kind of come back to you. They might come back to you and say, well, I didn't really understand what you're saying here. Can you provide a little more information? And then maybe with a little clarification, they'll say, yeah. Or they might say something, well, this isn't innovative enough. We've seen this done, or whatever. Yeah.
This is probably a nitpicky question, but say you're not selected. Will they tell you, or will they?
Well, so
if you don't get a response, you assume that you weren't selected.
Yeah, they will respond. Yeah. They will respond and should respond, and I don't know of a case where they didn't respond. You haven't responded, so.
Because I know that's some like particularly asking for funding, and you're like, well, if you don't hear from us, that's a bad
Yeah,
sign.
no, good question. But they will, yeah, they're good about responding and giving you feedback, and it might not be the feedback you want, but so that's their process. And I put slides like these for all of the agencies. I'm not going to read through them in every detail, but they're nice to look at later. So here's like, oh, here's an NSF, SBIR at a glance, and you can see that I'll just point out a couple. Their phase 1 award amount is $275,000. Their phase 2 is $1 million. They have NSF is nice because you can apply almost all year long. So it's not as limited as some of the other agencies. So submission windows, I would listed those, and then just how long it takes to get awards. Something that I didn't say yet, but is I guess sort of implied by everything I've said so far, is this is a long game, so you're not going to apply in one. It takes a while to put an application together. They have review committees. It takes them a while to make decisions. It takes a while for money to come to you. So it's not like you're going to have your idea, go fill out a form and have money in 3 months. It's going to be, here I say award notification 5 to 7 months after the submission window. So it can be up to a year with some of these agencies if you get accepted. I also put award rate on some of these, and it's the best award rate, the best I could find in my searches. But you can see NSF is 10 to 20% funding rate for phase 1. So and a much higher for phase 2. So if you've gone through phase 1, it's more likely you're going to get that phase 2 money. Let's see. And just a couple of examples from of NSF awards with people with UWM connections. So there's 2 companies listed here, CLC Global and Conovate, and maybe Conovate's been in the news quite a bit. But here you can see that there's a website you can go to search for awards. And you can see that Conovate, they had a phase 1, or both of these people had phase 1 awards. One of them had an STTR and one of them had an SBIR. So just some examples. And then now kind of getting on to NIH, and I'll move through these a little more quickly here because there's some, like as I said, there's some repetition. And when it gets to this point where you're topic searching, this is where an office hours really can benefit you. So NIH has 1.2 billion. So I mentioned before, they have the second largest piece of the pie, and they're health related, as you would guess. They also it's part really health and human services. So the Centers for Disease Control is here, and so is the Food and Drug Administration. They have, there's a link here for where to do your topic shopping. There are lots of different institutes within NIH. I forget how many it is, 24, 28, something like that. And they're divided by areas. So sometimes it's obvious, okay, well, there's aging or there's diabetes. So you might be able to find just by looking through the table of contents where to look for topics. They also have a very nice keyword search feature that allows you to kind of look through the document. And here, here I have National Institute on Aging. When you find a section, it'll tell you about their mission, tell you about their research topics of interest. And at the bottom there's a contact information. And so let's say you narrow it down and say, hey, it's most likely I'm in this particular area. Now I need to vet my idea. And whereas the NSF had this project pitch format, all the other agencies you have to reach out to the program manager. And I do have a template, an executive summary template that you can kind of use to at least put your thoughts together. You can attach it to an email. You can send something out to them and say, hey, I'm thinking about applying for SBIR or STTR. Overview of my idea. Can we schedule a 15-minute, 20-minute call to see if it's a match? And so all the agencies from here on that I'm going to talk about have sort of this part of the process that you want to go through before you just start writing a proposal. And feel free to ask questions along the way, which I know people have, but And at NIH at a glance, you know, kind of the same idea. What I will point out about this is they typically, so they have what are called, where basically broad agency announcements, and then they have kind of more specific ones that come along at different times. The broad announcements, they're omnibus, that's what they call it, happen really pretty regularly 3 times a year with deadlines in September, January, and April. And so that one's pretty, again, there's a number of opportunities to apply with them, whereas some agencies only have 1 per year. And UWM connections, so we have Pantherix and NanoAffix have both gotten awards from NIH. And again, these are small businesses that have some kind of connection with people from UWM. Department of Energy is the third biggest group. And what I'm showing here are all the different offices of the Department of Energy. And I'm just showing it. We don't expect you to read it through, but I'm just, again, just trying to show the kinds of things that they're interested in. They have $300 million per year. And they, right now is a timely time to be thinking about Department of Energy, because they have 2 solicitations per year. One of them's open right now. And this link would take you there. And basically, let's see, what's the, they actually have some webinars going on right now too. And one, example of drilling down again to the kinds of things they're looking for within the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. For example, they're looking for vehicle technologies, solar energy, wind energy, water power, geothermal technologies, decarbonization of different things. And that's just one of their many offices and the level of detail. Department of Energy tends to be a little more specific in what they're looking for. Here again is deadline. So they're the one that's open right now, the deadline for a letter of intent is in January, and proposal deadlines are February. And again, a couple of UWM affiliates that have received DOE awards. In this case, I'm showing one company, Conovate, and I mentioned them before. So Conovate had a National Science Foundation, SBIR, and here I'm showing that they actually have 2 Department of Energy STTRs, phase 1 and phase 2. So an example of a company that got both of those. And also the point, able to make another point is that this one company has applied to multiple agencies to kind of piece together the funding for their ideas, different aspects of projects, but they're able to piece together funding. USDA is the next one. So if DOE was 300 million, USDA is 30 million. So if DOE had 2 solicitations, NIH had 3 per year, NSF is sort of more open, USDA only has 1. And that just closed a month ago. So, you can, if you're doing USDA, some of these others, you have to really kind of think about when those deadlines are. The USDA is trying to get, they came and met with us at the other company and they feel like Wisconsin's underperforming, and they're really trying to find ways to, get better success out of, a higher rate of funding for Wisconsin companies. So there is that kind of stuff going on at these agencies, and you can kind of take advantage of it. So here are the kinds of topics USDA, and a lot of them are what you'd think, animal production, plant production, but then there are some that are rural and community development is sort of a unusual category that can mean lots of things. And so sometimes it's worth looking at agencies where you think, maybe I'm not sure, but it's kind of worth shopping them just to see. One solicitation per year is all I want to say here. The USDA, this is an example of a UWM connection. So NanoAffix, I mentioned, had a award from NIH, and here they also have one from USDA. And when I did my award search, they also have from National Science Foundation. So another example of a company that's kind of used this funding for a variety of reasons. Last one I'm going to talk about, and not very much, is the Department of Defense. And even though that had the biggest piece of the pie, it's the one I know the least about. So Where I was before, they have made it a point. So Wisconsin is underperformed for Department of Defense SBIRs and STTRs. And I think one reason is because it's really complicated. Yep.
Is they grants or contracts?
The defense is mostly contracts. Yeah, good question. Right. So they're the ones, and so here it is. DoD wants to be your customer. So this is a case where they're often very specific, and because they have this need and they want to purchase something from you when it's ready. And so they differ from a lot of the agencies in that way. And what's highlighted in yellow is the Air Force sort of tested a broader approach a few years ago. And now I just learned that the rest of other components of branches of the military are going to kind of follow suit. And so that specificity could be changing. So there are more chances that are broader. Yep. Oh, okay. And so this is an area where one of your resources I'm going to talk about will be, I would refer you to them. Yeah, just one more slide on Department of Defense is it doesn't just have to be weapons. You think of all the needs the military has, and here are a few points, a few bullet points. So there's bio-based fabrics, there's data management systems, there's you think about, there's energy issues, there's transportation issues, there's health issues. So lots of things that can be accompanied. Health, yeah, for sure. Health, for sure, health. And in this case, you could be a startup. Well, in all the cases, you could be an established small business, but in this case, because they're looking to purchase something at the end, it might be more likely than an established businesses. And this is where I'll refer you to my past employers, the CTC. They actually have workshops for helping you kind of prepare for Department of Defense applications. And I went to their site. They don't have dates up yet. Last year, it was at the beginning of the year. It was, maybe it was February or March or something like that. So, but that's a good entry point to Department of Defense, again, because it is tricky and complicated. So wrapping things up here, just a few resources I'm going to talk about. And, one of them is, I don't have any of you participated in I-Corps here. So right here in this building, Milwaukee I-Corps program. And so this is basically a program that, when I mentioned before that you're trying to make a business case for these proposals, and maybe you need it more figured out for a phase 2 than a phase 1. But even before that, having an understanding of your market, the I-Corps program is something that's offered here, and it basically helps you go through thinking about your business model, thinking about what you have an idea of the problem that needs to be solved, but thinking about, is there really a market for it? Who wants it? What might a revenue model look for that? So having a kind of general understanding or a basic understanding of what that business case might be. So it's a real asset to have it here. They offer it several times, 5-week workshop. So consider that. The other ones that the other thing I'll mention is, I've mentioned before, but this is the CTC, Center for Technology Commercialization. And this is a state-funded organization that provides free counseling on SBIRs and has other programming to kind of help you walk you through the process. And so it's fresh, and most of this is fresh in my mind, coming from there not too long ago. But a good next step, if you're considering going down this road, would be to check out, have a conversation with the people at the CTC. And even though they're part of UW system, they serve any small business or any startup in the state. So good. And you don't have to have started your business to have a conversation with them. It's very common that someone will call and say, hey, I've got an idea. I haven't formed a business. I'm just trying to see, is this SBIR-worthy, or what agencies? So kind of some of the same things I just talked about here. And these are the services that they offer. So they will offer one-on-one counseling. They have proposal preparation and submission support. So they have micro grants to help you hire a third party that can help you. They aren't going to write it for you with that micro grant money, but they're going to be like your project manager. Okay, here are the steps you need to do. You need to register right now. This is the section you should fill out, and we know this about budget. So they're kind of a level of more detail at kind of the next level of detail to walk you through the process and get you to that submission. You can also do with CTC, they'll also look at your drafts and provide feedback on them, either ad hoc or as part of review panels. And then they have, if you do get an award, they do have programs where there are state matching funds to help you develop, think about the commercial case. And a state matching fund for a phase 1 award is $75,000, and it's $100,000 for phase 2. And so there's, beyond where we kind of need to be thinking now, but really what I'd like to, want to get across with this is there's this great state agency that helps you take it to the next level. And if overall the SBIR funding rate is maybe 18% across all agencies, with CTC, it's boosted about 24%. For phase 2s, some of the people that have teams of program, some of the cohorts that we've had in our SBIR advanced programs, 100% of those get their phase 2 funding. So our rate is maybe 70%, or it was 70% where I was, where on average, maybe that's 40 or 50%. So participating with them helps your chances. And then really the last thing I wanted to say is that this is sort of a kickoff and an experiment, I guess, since I came with this experience, and every time I meet people on campus, they ask me about the SBIR. So, well, let's offer a session and maybe some office hours to see if I can be of help. And so I'm offering these, and I just kind of picked this. Sure, yeah. So basically the first Friday of each month, and although I'm going to do one this Friday because it's so close to this presentation, and it doesn't have to be that way. People are welcome to make an appointment with me. I'm just, like I said, I'm just testing this out. Could be Fridays aren't the best day. I've heard a little bit of feedback from a few people that that isn't, doesn't work for them, but maybe adjust that, or again, you can make appointments with me. Even for the office hours, I mean, I'm going to be here on this Friday morning from 8:30 to 10:30, and then that first Friday of each month, I'll be here. And if you show up, we'll have a conversation. If you want to send me an email and schedule time within that, that's fine. Then I'll know, okay, well, I'm sitting down with so-and-so from, 8:30 to 9 or whatever it is. That's fine too. And really where I think I can be the most help is probably on that topic shopping, right? That maybe that narrowing down, and I can open up some of these sites and say, hey, let's look at NIH, or let's look at NSF. And here's a couple of things, areas that you might want to do. So, yeah. So, so any questions? I mean, I know that was a lot, and we're kind of at the end here, but I'm here. Any other questions that haven't come up?
I don't know if you went over this already. Is there like a site that we can go to, like, to reference everything that you just said?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, that's a good question. I can share these slides, and maybe maybe if I just get names and emails of anyone that wants the slides. I thought about that after coming here. I wonder if I could post these somewhere. Yeah, so if you want to do that, or you can just send me an email and ask. I'll leave this piece of paper out and just put your name down on email if you want me to send the slides to you, or share them. Any other? Yeah, good question. And so what we would tell people at CTC was 3 months is a really nice cushion, right? 3 months is like 6 weeks is the least we would tell someone. And it depends on if you've been through the process before, or if you're used to applying for grants, or you kind of have a a little bit of a machine in place for, for grant writing. There are, and sometimes so there are some registrations that need to be done. And often if someone's done research before, they've done some of these registrations, and those registrations take time that's beyond your control, right? So, so some of them like, okay, I don't know why it's taking 4 weeks or 6 weeks to get this completed, and there's nothing I can do about it. And so you don't want to cut yourself short for something as what seems to be as simple as registrations. But generally, we would say the least amount of it would be 6 weeks if you've kind of got a little bit of background, and 2 or 3 months to do a good job, to be able to send out drafts, get some feedback on drafts, and make some adjustments. So. You mean from the agencies? I have not heard that. Yeah, I'm not aware of that. I know for the CTC micro grants that help you hire the service provider, they get, there's a allocated amount every year. Sometimes they can get used up toward the end of the year, but that's usually not, it hasn't been enough to reject people at the end of the year, because they're sort of, okay, the next year is about to start, and there's sort of enough wiggle room on timing to make it work. But theoretically that could be an issue. But on the agencies, I'm not familiar with that, so I'm not aware of that. Any other? Okay, well, thanks for joining me. I'll leave this piece of paper out, and feel free to use office. Thank you. Feel free to use the office hours if you have more detailed interest. So let's see. Recording. There we go.
So I figured out.